Just got back in from Vegas. Boy, I don't know. I don't want to do that joke. It's stupid. So we spent all of our money on gambling and illicit activities, and now we're back. We're probably going to have to close down operations. I had to remortgage the place, even though I'm not even sure how they gave me a mortgage. I'm only renting, but they in Vegas, if you go up and you sweet talk them, they will remortgage a place that you don't even own just so you can gamble more. So that's what happened. We actually didn't gamble. I think Kane threw away some money on the crap table, but he ended up making it back the next night. So,
how do you think we ended up in the subprime mortgage crisis? I mean, that's exactly how that played out.
Yep, that's pretty much it. So anyway, I hope you guys are enjoying the content. It's not as fast as some of the other YouTube channels because I know our audience is a little older, and I know our audience does not have time to watch 90 videos a day. So I'm not going to just tear you guys up. I know a lot of the news is already out there, but maybe you guys watch us for our opinions and our goofing off. Maybe, I'm hoping. It'll probably be a little bit crazier during Computex because that stuff's, in my opinion, a bit more important than the things that happen at CES, but did have a good time, and probably won't go next year. I'll be sending Albert and Spanks and maybe a few other people next year, but I probably will not be going myself. So anyway, again, thanks to HyperX and Sapphire and Thermal Tank, and I was actually glad that they were our sponsors. They had some good stuff this year. Anyway, first bit of news here. Actually, I want to tell you guys about a new thing we're doing this year. It is our design of the month. And this month we decided to keep it simple, and I think this design sort of lends itself to the winter. So we took our Viking here. This was designed by one of our members, by the way. And we made it a pale blue moon for the cold months of winter. Put it on a hoodie, and we also put it on a tri-blend t-shirt. These tri-blend t-shirts are extremely nice. They're even softer than the already soft ones that we sell. Probably the best fabric you're going to find. These are extremely premium. They do cost me a little bit more, like a couple bucks more, but we only raise the price like a couple bucks on these. So not making any extra profit, but there it is. So yeah, I freaking love these tri-blend. If you want to see what's to come, get one of these tri-blend just so you can see how nice the new stuff's going to be if we decide to do some more tri-blend. And let us know what you think about the tri-blend. That's enough of that spiel. Okay, down to business. So there's a hacker, and he's been making lots of stuff. His name is Sami Kamar. He made a worm that destroyed MySpace back in the day. Well, it didn't destroy, but it messed with MySpace. And he made a hands-free hacking necklace, and now he's made an interesting device that plugs into the wall, and you only need a few simple pieces. Right here is all you need, just a few things. I mean, a lot of these things you can get online for just a couple of dollars. I believe there's an Arduino in there. There's a wireless chip, and what this thing does, it plugs into the wall, and then it intercepts all the data coming from certain Microsoft wireless products, like the keyboards. It keylogs them, and if you go ahead and pick up one of these SIM chips here, it will send everything back through 2G to a server somewhere. So it'll just keep logging. It doesn't even have to have internal storage. You guys can opt for an internal storage model as well. But yeah, he built this thing, and it's kind of scary. It's right there it is. Microsoft said they had fixed this problem years ago, but as of the end of the year in 2014, he was able to go into Best Buy and buy a keyboard that used the same protocol, and he was able to hack it. So should we build about 90 of these things and just plug them in everywhere? It seems like it looks just like a charger, man. But even if you unplug it, if you have a battery inside, it will keep listening until the battery dies. So you'll unplug it and be like, oh, there, we took care of that problem. But no, it's still listening.
What's funny is it has its own communication channel through the cellular network. So, that's the problem, is that you don't know that this data is leaving your network, because it's not leaving via your network. It's leaving via the cellular network. So the disturbing thing here is Microsoft apparently doesn't actually know if they're selling affected keyboards, because Microsoft says that keyboards before 2011 are the only ones that are vulnerable, but apparently you can still go to Best Buy and buy them.
Yep.
That's for me is the non sequitur. That for me is the WTF.
Like, what's going on? And then there's another guy. If we look over here to Sweden, the Swedish Pirate Party. If you don't know anything about them, go ahead and look it up. They are an official party over there, and I believe Copiism is a religion over there. So I think it's in Norway, maybe Sweden. I forget if it's in Norway or Sweden. You guys can correct me. in the comments. But anyway, so Gustav Knipe, or is it Nipe? I don't know how you say the names over there. I might be pronouncing that incorrectly, but anyway, yeah, I believe copiism is in Sweden. Anyway, what he did was he went to a convention where, there was a bunch of officials, like military people and government officials and just all that sort of thing. And he set up his own Wi-Fi hotspot, and he named it Open Wi-Fi, and everyone started connecting to it. And guess what he was doing? He was logging all of the data. Now, the reason that he was doing this, and possibly the reason that Sammy was building, the hacking device, was to give them an idea at how bad and how egregious the current surveillance system is. Because he released a little statement here, and he was like, you know what, guys? The NSA and the FRA, which is like the Swedish equivalent of the NSA, they're doing things like this all the time. In fact, they have much better technology than I have, and they're able to do much more. And with his technology, he was only doing simple metadata collection. But he could tell, saying like, hey, if this guy logs into this email server and then checks out these 3 websites, he's probably this guy doing these things. It was very easy to really look at the metadata footprint and be like, that's this guy and here's what he's up to. So the NSA and the FRA are obviously doing a lot more than that. And he ends his little statement here with, the privacy intrusion is still enormous. So this is sort of a bit of hacktivism. It's not even hacktivism because it's an open Wi-Fi, and these guys, they joined it. They just joined it. So they did it themselves. He just he just set it up and let them join it. It's kind of funny.
Well, the point that he wanted to drive home with this was, he was saying, well, look, Snowden has showed us that the NSA has brokered deals with different countries in Europe. And so, like, let's say that the NSA goes to Germany and says, all right, Germany, we want access to all your communications gear, but we promise not to search on German citizens. That sounds great. That's fine. That's all good. So then they'll get a wiretap, and the NSA will exclude German data. Then they'll go to Denmark, and they'll say, hey, Denmark, we want to tap all your stuff, and we'll exclude Denmark citizens. And they do that. But wait a minute. They've got data from Germany, excluding German citizens, and they've got data from Denmark excluding, the citizens of Denmark. But those 2 tap points could be on the same fiber optic cable. It just depends on where it was in the country. And so exactly that has happened. Snowden has showed us that has happened. So from the Denmark cable, we get the German citizens' data, and from the German data, we get the Denmark citizens' data. So it's sort of a self-defeating thing, and that's sort of his point. He's like, look, you can, even though I don't necessarily have your identity, by you guys connecting on this Wi-Fi and me having the same access that the NSA has to the wire, you can still use encrypted stuff. You can still use your encrypted mail protocol, so I can't see your email address or the actual the actual unencrypted emails. If you've used an encrypted email protocol, I can still sort of piece together who you are based on what you're doing on the internet. And so it's way more invasive than you realize. And I think that the demonstration was very effective in showing that.
I'm not really sure what's going to happen to him. I'm not sure if they're going to go after him or anything like that. I imagine that if people continue to do things like this, they will go after him, but it's probably good for multiple levels. It gives them a taste of their own medicine, when they kick and scream when it happens to them. So that should tell you something. And then it also just continues to raise awareness, because when they kick and scream, there's news articles about, oh my God, look what's happened. And then the public will hopefully sit back in their chair and look at it and be like, yeah, well, isn't that the same thing you guys do to us? It's like, the congressman was had an anal probe at the police department because he did something. Well, that's something that happens to us every day. Why does he get special treatment? So that's what's going to happen. Just wait and see. Anyway, you ready to go ahead and talk about Obama's deal that he's got going on?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So
Obama's. Well, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to give everybody. So some people are sick of hearing about America, but guys, we're going to talk about what's going on in America. Then we're going to hop over to the UK, and then we're going to hop over to Canada, because there are 3 interesting developments in all those areas that have to do with the Prime Minister and the President. So. All right, so first off, Obama, he came out and he is sort of threatening to do something about the state of the internet. He brought up a little chart, and he was like, look at all these other major cities around the world and how they all have gigabit, and we don't have that. We've got very slow internet, and only very, very small municipalities have gigabit. And we all need to be like Cedar Falls, and we all need to be like, I think he mentioned Chattanooga and some other places like that. So in his speech, he said we need to take steps to move toward gigabit for everybody, high-speed internet access for everybody, and we also need to take steps so that there is what's the word? So that there is competition. like a controversy. I almost said it is right now a controversy if you want competition, but yeah, he wants competition as well. And he even said, he didn't really mention, he mentioned Title II a little bit, and he's mentioned it before, but he even said, there are some executive actions that we can take, so he did say the key word there, executive actions. Now, having the government involved in stuff is usually not the right way to do anything, but the free markets in this day and age have mostly been a mess because the big corporations come in and then they use the courts to sort of screw the free markets. So, it's like it almost makes the other competition illegal. So somebody's got to do something. And at this point, it's almost like the government is the lesser of two evils, which is scary. So
in 1996, the idea was that we would open up the last mile. And then with this last mile, there would be all this competition from these national companies. Because the reasoning in 96 was, well, you need to be a really big company in order to be able to have video services and voice services and that kind of thing. But we don't know that we want to give these big companies the monopoly on the last mile. So why don't we open up the last mile and make it to where that these companies can just plug in one point and get access to, a 30,000 person market or a 50,000 person market or a 100,000 person market. They don't have to run their own infrastructure, and any individual person is free to pick and choose which provider. So if you want some cable TV channels from Time Warner and you want some cable TV channels from Comcast, and in that universe, those two networks carry different channels, or they carry some channels but not others, you could do that. Or maybe you wanted to use Time Warner for video but Comcast for internet, or Time Warner for video and Comcast for internet and AT&T for voice. Well, you could do all that over the same line. And that was our idea in 96, the decoupling of the last mile infrastructure from these companies. And it was a really good idea. And so I'm somewhat skeptical when I hear a lot of the same ideas come out in this. It's like, oh, we need more competition. We need to increase things that make local broadband able to compete, because people don't build out things in rural area. And for 25 megabits of internet access, there is no competition. Well, all those things are accurate, but water is also wet and the sky is blue. So tell me something I don't know.
I don't know what could happen if he does like an executive action. I'm not even sure what that would be, or whose toes he would be stepping on. Normally, it's the FCC's position to come in and do things. And Tom Wheeler during CES had a press conference and said, "Hey, we're going to do some Title II reclassification, but with special allowances and rules, and it'll be." So he didn't really. He did say Title II. He did come out and say Title II is probably going to be a thing, but he also said the whole special rules and provisions and that sort of thing. So. I'm not going to hold my breath for any of this. Maybe good, maybe who knows.
We are watching this with bated breath, and that's all we're going to say about it right now. But you'll hear from us after every tiny little movement in anything to do with this. You'll hear about it. So good luck. Get ready.
Well, I guess Obama is already in a battle with the broadband networks. And if we scroll down here, let me just read this statement. It says, while the government-run networks may be appropriate in some rare cases, many such enterprises have ended up in failure, saddling taxpayers with significant long-term financial liabilities and diverting scarce resources from other pressing local needs. That's Michael Powell. He used to be the FCC chairman, and now he's in charge of the National Cable and Telecommunications Association, the NCTA, those of the same who were making that ridiculous, oh my God, Title II is going to make the earth explode advertisements that you guys have all been seeing. So, of course, he's going to be against anything that could possibly seen as progress as far as getting better internet access to everybody. He is in the pockets of the few. Big. Who cares? Let's just move on. I'm sick of it. What I really want to talk about here. Go ahead.
Well, the next thing is, so Obama's doing that, but he's also getting ready to criminalize using a computer, pretty much.
That really is. His hacking, his new hacking law. I don't think he sounds like he's relaxed and groovy and understands the internet, and then he comes out with his new, hacking law, and you're like, oh, he's not relaxed and groovy, and he does not understand the internet. First off, media and politicians. Hacking is not bad. Hackers are not bad, and the word hacking is not synonymous with terrorism. So let's just lay this down for a minute. There are white hat.
Oh my God, he knows how to use Minesweeper. He's a terrorist.
Exactly. So under his law, really, if you're in the same chat room as someone who is maybe found out later to be a hacker, you could be charged with like up to 10 years in jail. If you, it's just like if you are even in contact with hackers, if you come in contact with a link and maybe click a link that's to some compromised information, you could go to jail, even if you didn't, well, they say that you have to know what the link is, but that's not even, it's, if you click on it, they're going to go to court and they're going to prove that you knew what it was. So
yeah,
you
totally
really
get
can't touch
railroaded.
anything on a computer.
It's like, we talked about Andrew Auernheimer, Weave, going to jail because he put in the wrong link. Well, he won on appeal, and it was really interesting. He won his appeal on kind of a technicality, so it doesn't really matter too much here. But so I sent you a GIF just now in chat.
All right.
And so this GIF is like, you guys remember Windows 98 and the login thing? This GIF, watching this GIF would now be a felony. So let's all enjoy the GIF.
There we go.
while we still can. Welcome to communist Russia, where GIF felonizes you. Yeah, so we can't log in.
I am waiting for the law to show up right now. Yeah,
it's just, I mean, come on. And so this actually, for penetration testers and people that have these tools for checking network security and that sort of thing, is kind of a problem. So, in terms of like, if this law passes, they may not be able to do their job. If you're a network admin and you need to check and make sure that your users are using properly secure passwords, I mean, you can use a password that meets the complexity requirements, but it's still a ridiculous password. In other words, if you run a password cracker on your network and it only takes 5 minutes to get half the admin accounts, you probably chose poorly with picking some passwords there. And so those tools are useful to dig that out. And so this law is made by like somebody that has no idea what's going on with technology. So it's like, come on, guys, really? Come on. And this guy, this what this guy's doing in the GIF here, yeah, total felony country right there. Just watching it, because watching it is the same as doing it.
So everyone that watched us now, we've taken your personal information down. We have all your IP addresses, and we'll be sending the authorities to your house soon, probably after the episode. We want you guys to watch the rest of the episode before you go to jail. So keep on watching and let's move right along, shall we? There's an interesting article here. I'm not going to really, go deep into this, but there are 21, interesting state laws that prohibit or impair broadband competition. So go ahead, take a look at all these, and just
the only thing that we'll say here,
see what your city's like, or your town, or your state's like.
Most of the time, these laws were like, telecom lobbied these laws to be passed. Let's be clear about that. Cable industry, AT&T, they lobbied these things, and that's fine. The politicians that passed them may have just been incompetent and not evil, in that a lot of the time these lobbyists convince the politicians that they maybe want to pass these kind of things to prevent a small city from spending money on infrastructure that can never be hooked up to the internet. And so while a small town might put in a fiber optic network, these companies will never sell anybody in that small town an internet connection to use with that fiber optic. So you can have a fiber optic network in your town, you just can't connect it to the internet. And so these lobbyists sort of convince the politicians that that's what would happen, because that has happened other places, and so they're able to point at that. But the part of the whole thing that Obama was going on about was he would do away with states' ability to make these kind of laws at a federal level. And so I imagine that that's going to be the political opposition to this. I imagine that's going to be their thing. They're going to be like, oh, this takes away states' rights. States ought to be able to make their own laws and blah, blah, blah. And so I don't know. The irony of that is sort of fun, because these laws make it hard for small businesses to compete. Like, I'd like to start a fiber optic ISP and deploy stuff, and I totally would do that if I could get really cheap, really fast internet connections. But the reality is that that's really difficult to do depending on where you are.
What's that phrase? It's don't attribute to malice what you can attribute to what, stupidity? Is that how it goes?
Yeah.
That needs to be appended. The new phrase needs to be, don't attribute to malice what you can attribute to stupidity, unless the individual is a lawyer or a politician. That should be that should be the new
better.
Phrase.
Ignorance is no excuse.
Yeah, that should be the new thing, because they're always no good. Anyway, let's move on. And the CISPA is back, and this is actually kind of funny, because CISPA failed. It actually passed through the House, and in case you don't know what CISPA is, it basically gives It basically says, hey, listen, we don't need any warrants to do any of our wiretapping. It just takes away all that and makes it very easy for the NSA to spy without any checks and balances. So that's what it is. And it didn't fly in the Senate. So they said, okay, we're gonna go back and we're gonna make this a little less vague, because it was so vague that it was like anything goes, basically. So they went back, waited a little while, and now they're reintroducing CISPA, and not one word of it has changed from what was introduced last time. That's the definition of insanity. Am I wrong in saying that? That's the definition of insanity.
I think in this case, they're just going to keep submitting it over and over again until it goes through. So maybe that's not insanity. I don't know what that is, but it's something far worse. It's something very bad. It's like, oh, it's getting ready to be Christmas. Let's see if we can, send it through. Oh, we couldn't get it through before Christmas. All right, it's the after Christmas. We need to get everything done. Work spell. Maybe we can sneak it through and no one will notice. This is crazy. This is completely nuts. One of the big things in CISPA is exactly like what you were saying. It's like, oh, they can spy on everything. It doesn't say that. What it says is companies can share data with law enforcement with impunity. And so, like, if I have my files with Microsoft and I look at my little Microsoft agreement, and my Microsoft agreement says we will never share your files with anybody under any circumstances, we totally will not do that. At the very least, they open themselves up for a lawsuit. But with this CISPA, Microsoft can share your files with law enforcement if they choose to. And so it's like, well, can you share these files with us? It's like, yes. Oh, okay, that's fine. And then it's like, well, can you share network access so we can just get any files we want anytime? And it's like, okay, sure, whatever. And so then you lose oversight, because that is exactly what happened in the data centers. Is these things were tapped and there was no oversight as to what was being looked at. They just had full access to everything. That's the problem.
Have you seen the time?
Uh-oh, it's rant 30.
For this Rant 30, we are going to head over to the UK, and we're going to look at David Cameron. Look at this jackass right here. I am sorry, but everyone in the UK, you have a donkey for a prime minister. So anyway, David Cameron has decided that encryption is bad. All encryption is bad. And here's what he's saying. He's like, listen, we're already able to hoover up all this data. We've got everything. We're just sucking up data, sucking data all day long. But sometimes the data is encrypted and we can't see what it says. And there are bad guys out there doing bad guy things like terrorist things. God forbid, bad guys out there. And we need to read every bit of that. And he goes, and he also says, that's why we have the ability to open up the physical mail and look at it. Well, yeah, you need to get a warrant for that kind of stuff in the first place. But anyway, the bottom line is he doesn't really like encryption. It makes it difficult for them to spy. And so he's sort of saying that, all encryption is bad. It needs to go away because they don't need anything floating around out there which they cannot read. Here's his question. In our country, do we want to allow a means of communication between people which we cannot read? So later on, he goes to say that, as long as I'm in charge, we're going to make sure that we can read everything. And let's think about this for a minute. There's no such thing as, encryption just for banks and no encryption for the regular people. If there's no encryption, there's going to be no encryption. That's going to severely damage all of the businesses in the UK that rely upon encryption for secure, sensitive data, like logging into your bank, like making transfers and that sort of thing. It's going to secure all of the data companies in the UK that offer secure backup, secure storage for sensitive data, corporate documents, secrets, patents, all that sort of thing. It's going to jeopardize all of that, because now, if the government can get at it, then you better be sure that someone else can get at it, especially if it's floating around unencrypted. It will make it so much easier for those who do want to do something wrong to intercept and steal data. So that's just one part of it. We'll let you give your perspective as well.
It's profoundly retarded, I think, is the clinical term. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's so retarded that euthanization ought to be an option on the table. So, sorry, David.
What's wrong with the kids in Asia?
No. Seriously, not all jokes aside. France. Anytime anybody talks about banning all encryption, I think of France, because it wasn't until I think 1999 that France was okay with encryption. Before then, it was in the 90s. You had to get a special permit to use encryption in France, and so like working on Windows NT server in the time Windows NT Server. There was a particular piece of malware for Windows NT Server where if the server's region was changed to France, it just quietly turned off all encryption. And that was a great way to get all of the passwords with no, there were no rainbow tables. There was no, there was nothing like that. You could totally just go get the Windows password by setting your server's region to France. The next time somebody logged in, it would just store the plain text of their password in Active Directory. So that was kind of fun. And so we don't have to guess what it would be like without encryption. We can go look at what it was like in France in the 90s. And so the UK, I'm sorry, you're heading to where France decided not to be after the 90s. And so that should tell you something.
Shall we go over to Canada as well? There's a similar situation going on there. There's a new counterterrorism bill, and it is going to be overriding certain privacy limits. And the aim here is to stop the radicalization of the young people before they get crazy, before they put on funny-looking hats because God wants them to wear hats and blow things up, of course. So
well, the argument can be made. The argument can be made that 4chan radicalizes the youth, and so down with 4chan, the chamber pot of the internet.
There's all these guys growing beards and following Stallman and living in basements. We must stop them. We must stop them now. Oh, wait, they've gone over to 8chan. Well, let's seize that domain. So yeah. Anyway.
I can't think of. I mean, there's so much stuff that's worse than this. Like, maybe the argument can be made the Church of Scientology is worse than this, and it's like, really, is this the kind of thing that we're obsessed about? All of this legislation and all of this meddling. I mean, you can't. It doesn't make sense to try to solve the problem here. It's like, is there a problem that law enforcement needs to be able to get warrants and do investigation and that kind of thing? Yes, absolutely, law enforcement needs those kind of tools, but that doesn't mean that you have to throw everything out that's remotely sophisticated. Electricity can be used in the commission of crimes. We're not talking about doing away with the national electric grid. Cars can be used for getting away from crimes. We're not talking about doing away with cars. This I hope will go away once technology becomes more ubiquitous. Perhaps in 2 or 3 or 4 more generations that have grown up with technology and that have been exposed to technology from day one, we won't have such ridiculous proposed solutions to these types of problems. Just because there's encryption, just because there's all this stuff going on with technology, doesn't mean that you can't do good old-fashioned investigative work. I mean, look at the investigative work we did around the North Korean Sony hack and those kinds of things. Good old-fashioned detective work still works in a digital age. You're not going to be able to write a program to do it. You're not going to be able to write, Super Hoover data vacuumer 5000 that'll just, it's like, let me just run some numbers here and okay, yeah, I've got our list of terrorists in the country. There's 12 people. We're going to dispatch the black helicopters and they're ready for pickup. That's never going to happen. And anybody that tells you that these tools will help that happen is lying to you, and they want something else.
Well, you mentioned good old-fashioned police work, and we'll get to this in just a minute. There's an article about this, but the Dread Pirate Roberts from Texas, he's the guy who did the Silk Road, and it looks like, if you look at the case, they were doing old-fashioned police work. They weren't relying on a lot of, new methods. They were even using some social hacking. So
yes. And see, this is a good investigation.
And then they actually caught someone who was doing something illegal. Whether you agree whether or not it should be illegal, he was doing something that is illegal, and they caught him doing old-fashioned police work. We'll get to that in a minute, though.
His defense is that he was set up, and so his defense is that he came up with Silk Road and he did the software, but then he turned over control to somebody else. And so it's an interesting defense, and I don't know if it'll be supported by the evidence.
Oh, I may as well go ahead and get into it while we're here, because the big problem right now is that the jury, they have no idea. I mean, they have absolutely no idea, and the prosecutor is just summarizing very basically and not doing a good job of it, because apparently they don't understand anything at all in the first place. And so the judge took her aside and was like, listen, if the jury doesn't understand anything, and if you're just giving them these really general basic descriptions that are mostly simile and metaphor, this is not going to work. So I think the judge has got a pretty good grasp on what's going on, and I want to commend him for looking at the situation and saying, if the jury can't figure this out, we're going to have to figure something out as far as this case goes. Maybe it might end up being a mistrial or who knows what. So that'll be kind of a fun one to watch. I'd imagine the only... Go ahead.
Well, I mean, so the Constitution guarantees, in specific language, that the jury will be of your peers. And so I think that could be argued to mean not necessarily your social peers, but also people that will have some understanding of the technology or of the bits and pieces. And again, this goes back to the generational thing. And a couple of generations is probably not going to be a problem. Right now, it's a big problem. And so I think that if, when you're selected for the jury, that you can be asked questions like, what's your stance on the death penalty? And how do you feel about this? And how do you feel about that? I think it's totally reasonable that the jury questions could be, do you know what DNS is? Have you ever used Tor? Do you know what a web browser is? Do you know what TCP/IP is? I think those are perfectly reasonable questions. Since, people are randomly selected for jury duty, I think it would be important that the people on the jury have at least some technical background. I think that would be important for getting a fair trial. And I think the founding fathers of the United States understood that. And so I'm surprised that it's an issue of debate in this trial. I guess it's just the changing society stuff. But I really think that's something that his lawyer ought to argue about, and they should get a new jury probably.
Yeah, well, they probably ought to get a new prosecutor as well. The prosecutor, one of the worst things that they're doing is trying to, where they're using the term dark web, and they're trying to make it sound like something incredibly insidiously evil. The dark web. Have you turned to the dark web? Well, the dark web is like, 95% of the internet is like the dark web. I'm not sure if that's the exact statistic, but it's somewhere up there. Like, a vast majority of the internet is considered the dark web. Just stuff that's just not hittable through Google. But there's a ton of stuff out there floating around in cyberspace that's not, available on search engines and all that. That's
technically
not evil.
Technically, a large part of Microsoft's site is the dark web because you have to log in order to get to the content. And so, I mean, that's the dark web, and that's Microsoft. So what do you... Well, I mean, that goes without saying, but...
Anyway, do you guys remember the Verizon Super Cookie? Wendell, you give them the 2-second, version of what it is, and then I'll jump in and tell you what's happened with it.
Do you use Verizon Wireless? Because if you use Verizon Wireless, they're injecting an extra tracking tag in your HTTP headers that you can't delete. They're changing your traffic. And they were like, oh, no ad agency's using this. We just use this for internal purposes. Uh-oh. Looks like an ad agency showed up using it.
Yep. And so TechDirt contacted this ad agency like, hey, what are you guys doing? And they're like, oh, people can opt out. And here's what happens when you opt out. So you opt out. It creates a cookie saying, oh, this guy's opted out. But as soon as you clear your cookies, it pops back up. And then they're like, well, hey, it popped back up. And then the response was something to the tune of like, oh, yeah, we have a tracking cookie there so we can track you to make sure that we're not tracking you. But in the meantime, it's still tracking you. What? That sounds really convoluted, but if you play that back in slow motion, it'll be correct. So, yeah. Is that illegal? That's got to be illegal.
It should be illegal. It should be illegal for Verizon to mess with your unencrypted traffic, but they are, and they should stop this nonsense. And they've been asked to stop this nonsense, but they haven't. But the quote is great because they were like, "Oh yeah, it was still tracking you, but that was just a glitch. We fixed the glitch. It's fine now." And the ProPublica people were testing it again, and they were still being tracked. So yeah, and there's nothing you can do about it on an unencrypted Verizon connection. The only way around it is to use a VPN. Oh,
we know a couple that'll work for you, so let us know if you guys need a VPN hookup. Anyway, some of Verizon's shareholders, some of their big shareholders like Trillium Asset Management LLC and Nathan Cummings Foundation, are getting a bit sick of the way Verizon's been and also their stance on net neutrality. And their bottom line here is they're saying that this is extremely negative as far as implications for the future of the company. So, yeah. And they're also telling investors that. They're saying, listen, if you want to invest, they're doing some things that are pretty anti-future. And that's really what we are. We've got two sides of a fence here. We've got people who are stuck in the past, holding on to antiquated models and trying to rig the system so that those antiquated models are the only models, where we have people here that are just moving forward and being like, these idiots here trying to litigate against us and trying to create laws and all that stuff, when instead of innovating, we're just going to take off one of these days and leave them behind. It's going to be difficult, but it's going to happen if they don't change their ways. So, there's that.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine a world where Comcast and Time Warner, we're providing ridiculously fast internet connections to people for reasonable rates that weren't rising at 3 to 5 times the rate of inflation,
And weren't tracking them.
and they basically behaved like ethical companies.
Yeah.
People, the there just wouldn't be as much of a push. It's like people would be like, oh, the connection I have is fine. We don't need municipal broadband. We don't need, Google Fiber, because I've already got 150 megabit or 500 megabit or whatever it is. And so that seems to be what these investors are saying. It's like the Verizon is only going to hasten internet service providers being turned into utilities because of their, just the abject unethical behavior here. So that's an interesting perspective, and I'm glad that the investors are picking up on that.
Yeah. So I promise the rest of the episode is going to be a lot more fun. We've got all the nonsense out of the way. Now let's have a little bit of fun. So remember, well, this is half fun, but Elon Musk has been not negative on AI. He's just been saying, "Hey guys, let's make sure that we verify that the AI is not going to come to life and kill us. Let's make sure that we're not making Skynet." And now he's kind of put his money where his mouth is, and he's donating $10 million to a research facility. And the goal here is to keep, quote unquote, keep AI beneficial. So he's giving that money to the Future of Life Institute, and they're just going to be doing a lot of assessing and a lot of testing and just asking a lot of questions about consequences that not a lot of other companies are asking. A lot of people are just plowing forward. So some people are saying he's a nut for doing so, but hey, if he wants to pay for this, I'm all for it. Let him pay for it. That's great. I'm not sure if $10 million is enough to cover all the questions and answers that need to be, I don't know, proposed, but, whatever. It's a good start, and at least he's not just out there talking. He's actually putting his money somewhere, so there you have it. Let me know in the comments if you think he's crazy for doing this, if you think it's just too much worrying and there's no big deal, or let me know if you think it's responsible. I tend to lean toward the side that it's always responsible to be aware of all the consequences and all the possible scenarios. So I think that's just what he's really getting at. Not that, oh, it's the end of the world, oh God. So yeah.
In order for an AI to be evil, it will have to be conscious. Until we have AI that's conscious, we will just have a disembodied intelligence carrying out the bidding of its masters. So it will just mindlessly, like if I create an AI and it's really good, it's like, figure out a way to get the gold out of Fort Knox, and it just goes off and does it. It's not really evil because it's not really conscious of what it's doing. And so, with the AIs like Watson, where Watson, answers questions and does that kind of thing, it's like, Watson, what's the quickest way to kill 1 million people? It's like, well, Watson could maybe come up with something for that. I don't know. No, probably not. But, Watson 5.0 or Watson 10.0 or whatever, maybe. And so those AIs, they don't have any concept of evil. It would only be sort of a sentient AI, and we're quite a ways away from that, I think.
Yeah, I'll be really worried when they develop the first sentient AI and his name is Pol Pot or something. Like, here's our new AI. We've named him lovingly Pol Pot. So
Mouse a bit.
All right, let's take a look at
Mouse a Turing.
Oh man, let's look at Google's new
Turing. Sorry,
the mouse a Turing machine. All right, let's look at Google's real-time translator. It's pretty cool. It's a smartphone application that's just released. You can basically point at signage, menus, and that sort of thing, and it will give you a live translation. I haven't tried it. I'm not sure if this actual video or this representation is correct. See how they're like superimposing the real words and removing the other words? That seems pretty crazy. I'm sure that's where it's going, but if that's how it works, let me know. I would imagine it would just take scan something and then give you the translation on the screen, but that's still pretty awesome for something to be quick enough to recognize, different fonts and different languages, pick it up, and then translate it into your native tongue. That's wild. Or into your native written language. Pretty wild.
I like that some programmer somewhere has actually, taken the time to make sure that the text fits in approximately the same amount of space. Because they really, really worked hard to fit to the future there on the second line into roughly the same space.
Yeah. Very interesting. All right. Hardware stuff. Apparently AMD has some stuff coming. They got the 380 coming out, maybe 380X, maybe the 390X coming out, but we're not really supposed to talk about that. We weren't allowed to even like ask questions about the future while we were at CES. No one would talk to us about it. So we know that it's probably going to be the next thing's going to be the 380 or the 390X. That's just common knowledge. It's what's going to happen. And there is some news coming out about that. But first off, I want to just discuss this bellyache here that one of the Radeon Graphics team members, Robert Halleck, is having. He really hates Nvidia Gameworks now because Nvidia Gameworks is a closed platform, and it basically gives developers a very convenient tool to do a lot of interesting effects, like different lighting effects and explosion effects and just that kind of thing. It's sort of like an API library, but it's very closed. And he says it's bad for gaming because like if a developer uses that stuff, and a lot of times in this article it's like, oh, Nvidia is paying these developers to use this. I don't think that's the case. I think Nvidia is sending a bunch of technicians to help with the development of the game, and that is helpful to the developer because it makes them they do more quality testing while the Nvidia developers are there, and they're also able to implement features like those found in Nvidia Gameworks. So it's bad for AMD because, of course, AMD is not able to take advantage of that, and they're forced to render those same things in much more expensive ways. So they would like for that to go away. And what I have to say to AMD is stuff like TressFX. That's an AMD thing. If you guys want NVIDIA to get rid of Gameworks, get rid of TressFX and all that stuff, because that was an AMD exclusive thing, and you guys are usually open source with most of these things. I'm not sure if there's any other AMD exclusive things. There aren't that many, but I'm pretty sure TressFX was like the big one that was like, AMD, if you want Lara Croft's hair to blow in the breeze beautifully, you better have an AMD card, okay, buddy? So get rid of yours and then throw stones.
The problem here seems to be that this is part of NVIDIA's business strategy.
Yep.
And so, the quote here is, "Isn't it disturbing that all of the GameWorks-enabled titles to date have not offered similar optimizations for AMD Radeon customers and have forced these customers to run code optimized for a different product, often at a penalty?" Now, if you were to look at this and say, well, that's just NVIDIA doing the work and offering the developers, something useful, that's one thing. But if we look at what AMD has released, especially with Mantle is a significant thing, and it's open, and anybody can adopt it. NVIDIA could adopt it if they wanted to.
Intel's going to be using it soon.
Yeah, Intel is going to be using it soon. Intel is working on major optimizations for their graphics platform as we speak. That is one of the biggest improvements on the next couple of generations through Skylake. So that's a thing. Yeah. And, it just shows the different sort of ethical situation with either company. And, it's like, I want my games to run really good. And so, well, yeah, NVIDIA is going to help from a developmental standpoint, but they also could publish how GameWorks works so that AMD could adapt it. NVIDIA doesn't necessarily have to do something that runs on AMD cards, but if they published openly how GameWorks works and the code behind it, then AMD developers could port it, and then GameWorks would be a mutually beneficial thing. But it's part of NVIDIA's business strategy to lock titles into proprietary optimizations, and we as gamers ought to be cognizant of that, and we ought to be reluctant to support titles that use something like that.
Well, the thing about gamers, and I'm going to call some of you guys out on this, a lot of you guys pick your favorite poison. You pick your favorite DRM, and you make fun of all the other DRMs, like you make fun of Origin and Uplay, but you love Steam. They're all versions of DRM, but one is much nicer than the others, and it's nice, and there's cushions everywhere, while the other ones, it's like, there's a barb here, and there's this is not comfortable at all, and there's all these ads everywhere and all that sort of thing. Well, it's just a different type of poison, and you're picking your favorite type of DRM. The same thing with a lot of people who are NVIDIA fanboys and make fun of AMD users all the time. Well, guys, what we need from NVIDIA is for them to support gamers. They need to be supporting the entire community and not just working on closed things that trap you into an ecosystem. That's not good for gamers as a whole, and of course it's not good for AMD, but that's not really their concern. They can still make a great product.
Microsoft does.
Yeah. Why can't they just make a good product and let that be what you want to buy? Like, this is the fastest graphics card. It's awesome. It runs at it's got a great, TDP. It's nice and quiet, and you guys should love it. Why can't that be it? Why do they have to do all these nonsensical closed source things like G-Sync and stuff? We did see some FreeSync, even though that's a secret. It's obviously FreeSync. The vendors would not say it. They were like, Yeah, it's that other thing, But we saw some impressive FreeSync stuff at CES. That's going to be coming out soon, pretty much the same time for all the vendors. They're all going to be releasing FreeSync monitors at the same time. But some of them were so impressive. I'm talking like 144 hertz at 1440p impressive. So really, really impressive stuff. Very nice looking monitors, IPS displays as well. So can't wait for those. And that's not something that only AMD can take advantage of. Nvidia could take advantage of it if they wanted to. No special hardware required. Intel can take advantage of it. Anybody can do it. So that's what I really like to see. I actually use Nvidia myself because I need a couple extra FPS. But you know what? If the 390 or whatever, the 390, 380 comes out, it's not, ridiculously loud and it's really powerful, I'm going to switch right over to that and I'll be happy using it. And if Nvidia brings something else out, maybe we'll think about it. But got to get away from that closed.
I use the
nonsense.
290X.
What's that?
I use the 290X. It's face meltingly awesome, especially on Linux.
Yeah, we've got a new 8GB 290X coming in. It just doesn't quite stack up to the 980 in most games. And I want those extra 3 FPS in with my modded Skyrim. But the 8GB version might actually help for all the textures and that sort of thing. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see also how that is for rendering.
I want to try that with After Effects acceleration because I bet with 8 gigs of frame buffer, it's going to be face meltingly awesome.
Yep, it'll be like a fire. All right. Moving right along here, let's check out Google's Project Ara. Now, we've looked at this before. That is their modular phone. You can get anything you want, build it together. You can even have it set up so that you have multiple networks in the same phone, different cameras. You can just basically... it looked like something that was like, oh, that's novel and cute and all that stuff. But no, they're actually serious about this. They're on the version 2 of the hardware. It's called Spiral. Spiral 3 will be out sometime mid this year. Or is Spiral 3 the one that's out right now? I forget. Anyway, the bottom line is they moved from their standard hardware onto an ASIC, which is way faster and uses less power. They're going to have 4G very soon, and just a load of interesting features here. So they want to create an entire ecosystem around this idea. I'll go ahead and click on this so we can see that article. And there it is. It's pretty cool looking. It's not as... it doesn't look as bulky and cumbersome as I thought it was going to look. It looks actually kind of sleek and decent. Different cameras. I don't know. What do you think? You think you're going to try one of these Project Ara phones?
Rumor has it that they're going to have these things on like a food truck kind of deal in Puerto Rico. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. So you can just go up to the truck, basically pick the modules you want. They build it, and then you got a phone. And I think that suggests that these are not, the first generation of this is not going to be super insane feature phone or super insane smartphone. I think the Puerto Rican market is a little more, I don't want to say dated, but a little bit more, not looking for the latest, like the Note 3 or iPhone 6 or Samsung whatever or Moto X or, what these big powerful feature phones. I think they're looking for more. It's like, I'm going to get a phone that's got a ridiculous battery, so I'm going to get 3 battery modules, or I'm going to get this really awesome camera module. It's really awesome to see that it's taking shape, but I still worry that this type of hardware is going to be like Google Glass, where it's like, yeah, it's a really amazing piece of technology, but how does this translate into something useful?
I don't know. It looks a little bit more. I mean, it's still a standard phone. Google Glass, they were breaking a lot of new ground there. This one's just breaking new ground in the fact that it's totally modular, and a lot of these pieces are so small that they're easy to swap out. So I don't know. I think I might be more positive about it than you. I'm actually looking. I might even switch over to one. I don't know.
I remain skeptical unless it's like really awesome. It would have to be really, really awesome, and then maybe. I hope that it's awesome. Yeah, but I don't think it's going to be that great.
Back to graphics cards. Speaking of that 380X, apparently one of the members of the AMD graphics team, one of the people who's been making this, Linglan Zhang, I believe it is. Zhang, everyone who speaks the language natively is cringing right now. Linglan Zhang. I don't even know. Anyway, he's a system architect manager at AMD. And he's talked a little bit about what we could be looking forward to. They've teamed up with Hynix to create a totally new type of RAM that can stack directly onto the what am I looking for here? It's directed right into the silicon. So before, the heat was the big problem with that, but also just look at the max bandwidth here. Now this graph I want to say is based upon a DDR3 module that's only 8 bytes, so that's a bit silly. So they're obviously showing how much better it is, versus like some of the worst DDR3 out there. And I know GDDR5 can be faster than that as well. But even then, we're talking like, max bandwidth of 128 to 256 gigabytes per second. And that's with the memory. So it also seems to be decently low power, If they can get that down, it could be the first card in the world to feature this new fancy type of memory, HBM memory. I like what Hynix done. Hynix DDR4 is absurdly fast. If you guys find any DIMMs that are Hynix, overclock the hell out of them. They'll work. The Micron stuff is solid as hell. The Hynix stuff is just completely ridiculously overclockable. I'm not even sure what they did. Maybe it was like an accident, like, whoa, we made these magic DIMMs. So anyway, just figure out what your DDR4 is. If it's Hynix, overclock it, even though it won't affect gameplay that much.
It's made out of unicorn blood.
It is.
I'm really looking forward to seeing how this stacks up, because if like a year ago I think we had like a 20-minute conversation on how die stacking was probably the way of the future, and this is exactly what they're doing here. They're talking about vertical stacking and interposer stacking, which is really cool, and that's probably where we're going to end up. And if heat is not a problem, this is going to take over the universe.
Yep. All right, let's take a look at a really, really interesting 3D printer that is out of my price range, unfortunately. But this is the first 3D printer that I'm like, oh, I want that. Before, I've always like, yeah, they can do some cool stuff and they can print some knickknacks and maybe a couple of interesting tchotchkes and that sort of thing. But I haven't really gone crazy about it until this. So this is Voxel 8's 3D printer. And this one can print just about anything, and you can even modify it to work with multiple different materials. They say in their video that they are masters of materials, basically, and they'll be adapting this to work with multiple different types of materials, but it can also print circuitry. They have some printable ink that is, conductive, and the way this works is you can be printing something. Let's say, if you guys watch the video here, I'll mute it. You'll be printing something here, and as it's printing, I'll get over here to this part. There you go. You can lay a chip in the middle of it. It will continue to print, and you can just keep adding more and more chips into each layer. You can like pause the printing, have it come out, then you put a chip in there, and then you put it back in, and it'll print right over top of the chip while it also prints all the circuitry on there. So you can design, this video they made a quadcopter that is a self-contained unit with all the electronics on the inside. I guess the only downside is once you print the electronics into a device, it's pretty much impossible to open it up and repair it or fix it or change the components at a later time.
So you just need to 3D, modify your 3D printable model, and then you'll be all set.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Maybe modify it into something that like snaps open and then closes again. But it's pretty cool.
I'm surprised we haven't seen this type of mod sooner. I sketched a mod for the original MakerBot that added a pick and place reels on the left and right side. And so what that is like normally surface mount components come in spools, and they come with these little paper things. And there's actually, it's like if you've ever seen dot matrix printer paper, these spools have little holes punched in them, and they go in these little tiny like things that sort of unroll it and unwrap it. And so as it unrolls and unwraps, it actually lifts the plastic off, and there's a little tray that has the component in there. Well, a pick and place machine is just a vacuum needle that comes over and will pick up the individual component from that tape and then place it somewhere. And so the XY assembly for the printhead totally already does that. And so the XY assembly on the 3D printer could totally just go over to the right spool, advance it so that it opens up, grab a component, and deposit it on a circuit board where it needs to be. Now, in a typical assembly line, there's a bunch of those machines that have 4 or 5 or 10 different components loaded in them, and a typical circuit board might have 100 components or 200 components or whatever. And so on a MakerBot, you're not going to get more than like 10 components on each side. But I thought it'd be a fun experiment to do that, so that you could sort of 3D print and pick and place, because you can do the conductive filament thing, and that works really well. So I'm surprised that it's taken this long to do that, because if you can etch circuit boards with ferric chloride, you can get a copper sheet, and the best circuit boards I've ever etched instead of like you do an iron-on transfer with like toner paper, no, you just lay the copper plate down on the MakerBot and then print the negative of your circuit out using the printer and then etch it, and that works really well because the ferric chloride leaves the plastic alone.
You may have just given someone a multi-million-dollar idea. We should probably get on patenting that thing. Yeah.
It's still
anyway.
it's weird because it's still like a some assembly required thing. Like it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's like I'm going to print 3 or 4 sets of components and put it together. But with Arduinos and general purpose processors, this is the next generation is going to be 3D printers that can do pick and place and can do circuits and can do conductive things, and so that's where it's going to go.
Yep. So, some of your friends got a Lamborghini, some of them have a Corvette, oh, poor guys. And then others have, I don't know, whatever, Maseratis, what's the McLaren or something like that. And then you roll up in this. It's a piloted mech suit from Japan. You can get it for only $1 million right there on Amazon Japan. They're actually selling piloted mech suits. And it only goes about 10 kilometers per hour. Let's go ahead and get the video playing right here. Here it is, driving around. This mech suit, this bread truck behind him, just like, well, there's another mech suit. It's just another day in Japan, I suppose. So you can pilot it in low mode. It's a low riding mech suit, or you can put it up in high mode. It has some weaponry as well. It's got a cannon that launches like water type missiles. Here we go on the screen. These water missiles. It also has a sort of a Gatling gun that shoots BBs. But here's the one weapon. It's going to shoot some water out of here. I don't know. Are you going to order one of these? Maybe blow all your money on one of these?
It would be like,
It's
for the
shooting
billionaire who has everything.
Yeah. Now he's got a mech suit. It's funny. Like they just shot it's $1 million, and the thing cannot hit a target with its water rocket launcher thing. Just doesn't happen. I'm sure it can hit it with BBs, but yeah. That's what's the point of this thing again?
I like the fact that thing is to convince a billionaire to give whoever built that $1 million so they can retire.
It fires the BBs. It fires the BBs by smiling. You smile, and that yeah, and that fires your weapons.
Smile detected. Destroy.
Yeah, be careful not to cause a shooting spree by smiling too much. It's just so funny, though. How can you stop laughing? You're driving around in a mech suit, just mowing everything down, and you're laughing hysterically. So what's going to happen? You're going to keep mowing everything down. So, yeah. What a ridiculous invention here. Getting in and out of the mech suit is not nearly as sexy as it is in the anime. Jumping off is dangerous, so yeah. All right, so let's move on. What else do we have to talk about here? Oh, check this out. Wi-Fi is about to get a lot faster, but don't get really excited just yet. So WiGig is the new thing that's going to be coming out. I think Sony, Microsoft, Apple have been working on this. It's the 60 gigahertz bandwidth, and we'll be seeing some devices for this coming out pretty soon. The theoretical maximum on this for the 60 gigahertz bandwidth, I believe, is 6 or 7 gigabytes per second. 7 gigabytes per second. Gigabit. Now, here's the deal. Gigabit. Yeah, I said gigabytes. 7 gigabits per second. Not 7 gigabytes per second. Now, here's the deal with this. It really only works in a straight line, and it doesn't like to go through walls. It is a much higher frequency, so you won't have as much... There apparently won't be as much interference because it's a very directional type technology. It's got... They said it has several little antennas that kind of point where they're sending the data. I'm not sure how that works, but it apparently won't have nearly as much crosstalk and that sort of thing. But if you've got walls, if you need to go around things, you can bounce it off things and maybe try to avoid some walls that way. But that sounds a bit specialized, and it also sounds like you're going to be losing quite a bit of speed if you're doing things like that. Still, if you have a straight shot or you're in line of sight with your router, it should be really, really fast. I can't see something like this replacing traditional wireless AC and wireless in devices just because it has so much trouble going through walls and that sort of thing. I don't know if it'll be the new thing in houses, but it might have some special application somewhere.
I'm not sure that it was the 60 gigahertz, but there was a version of this that Dell was using for their wireless docks, and that worked okay. But I would also point out that the picture that they have is like, oh, it's up to 7 gigabits. So I was like, well, you're not going to get 7 gigabits on that 2.5 gigabit per second PCI Express interface. So
yeah.
the theoretical maximum of what's pictured here is 2.5 gigabits per second. So let's be clear about that.
Yep. All right, let's check out this new telescope. I'm actually kind of excited about this. The Large Synoptic Survey Telescope, or the LSST. It's my favorite college basketball team. No, I don't even know. So this is going to be operational by 2020. It's got a 10-year mission, and it has a 32,000 megapixel camera in there that will be shooting not only images, but videos deeper into outer space than ever before, and also just giving. Here's the interesting thing. They say this will be the first telescope that's going to be able to capture and catalog more celestial bodies than there are human beings on the Earth. So that's really cool. The overall idea here is they're trying to understand a bit more about dark matter and dark energy, because all the computations do not work unless you add in a ton of dark energy or dark matter or something. So there's something else out there, and they're trying to find it, and maybe this will help them in their quest. So things still do not make sense out there. Anyway,
it's mind bending when you on a clear night you go outside and you look up, and the photons that are striking the back of your retina have traveled potentially for billions of years just to smack into your retina. That's just mind bending.
We should make our own version of the cosmos and bend minds all night. All right, let's talk about some video games. Let us know what you guys think of that in the comments. I'm kind of curious, do you think that this will lead to the discovery of whatever dark energy or whatever dark matter is? Maybe we discover something that's entirely different that basically fills in that gap. But right now, they're not exactly sure what it is. Could be anything, but we can't see it. But something's there. Anyway, it's like 94% of the stuff is just gone. No, it's 96% of the stuff, right? Because we only see 4%. Anyway, let's move on. Grim Fandango is coming back, and it's going to be remastered. And they really didn't do too much to it. They just made the graphics before were pretty jaggy around the edges. Oh yeah, if you guys have not played Grim Fandango, it was a LucasArts game, I believe, right? Double Fine Productions. I think LucasArts was the publisher back then. Anyway, Double Fine Productions, they've been doing a lot recently. I'm sure you guys have seen some of their work. They make really quirky and interesting click adventure games. They made the Monkey Island series, the Full Throttle games back in the day, and since then they've been continuing to make new games. I can't even remember the name of the one they recently made. Kane was playing through it a couple of weeks ago. He was streaming it as well. Anyway, Grim Fandango was one of their best games, the most interesting games, and they've gone through and just really smoothed out all the graphics and everything. And it's got a very interesting art style. Dia de los Muertos, I believe, is the holiday that this takes place around. I haven't played this in a while, so it'll be interesting to replay. And they also went back in and re-recorded the entire score. So they put a little bit of money into it. And I don't know. I'm making a recommendation right now. I'm totally anti-pre-order, but I'm gonna say this is probably gonna be an okay thing to pre-order, because if you haven't played it and you want to play something that's really awesome, it's already a game. It's already a thing. We already know it's good. It's just going to be a little nicer to look at and easier on the ears and eyes. So there's that. All right. Hotline Miami 2 has been banned in Australia effectively because they have denied giving it a rating. So look at this game here. They say it's for some sort of sexual violence. You can turn that on and off in the game. Even then, look at the graphics. The thing that gets me is there are movies that depict all of these things that are available in all of these places. Why is everyone so scared of video games dealing with mature content like this? I'm not even going to say whether or not it's good or bad. There's just a double standard here, and that's what I'd like to point at. There is a double standard here where if you have a movie that does these things, that's totally fine. You can put stuff like this on daytime television almost in the USA now. People just ripping each other's heads off and committing, acts of just doing unspeakable things to, I don't even want to say things on the air because the SJWs will get upset if I even say certain things that you can just watch on daytime television. And then they get upset about a game that looks like it belongs on not even the Super Nintendo, on the regular Nintendo. So I don't even know.
I would like to, I mean, I don't know if this will happen, but one thing that I see happening with this is game companies starting to take all that content out of the game. Like, it's not even an option. You can turn it on and off. And then they have a day one patch. So you go and you buy the game, the normal channel, so that it can be in retail. And then before you can play, it's like, oh, you got to download the patch. Then we're going to turn all that stuff back on. Ta-da!
That's genius. I mean, I'm sure like a lot of people, the powers that be would freak out, but it may not even hit the news unless, I don't know, Anita Sarkeesian or some idiot like that goes and says, hey, these pixels are doing bad things.
These pixels are harming other pixels. Those pixels are terrorists. They need to be liberated. We need to bring democracy to those pixels.
Yeah. The gender of these pixels, I'm not really sure. We need more pixels of a different gender. We need more transgender pixels. Can we do that, please? I don't know. I'm getting a little silly right now.
I've read some very dark fiction books in my time, and some very good fiction books that have a lot of dark passages. I mean, let's talk about like the Heinlein stuff. I mean, nobody wants to talk about Heinlein books at all.
They were this day and age. People still love Heinlein. They look back at him in retrospect. I think I got some over here, and this book right here. This is a pretty sexist book. I mean, I don't even agree with this. I am bothered by this, but it's a hell of a read nonetheless. And me reading this does not mean that I adhere to his philosophies. But yeah, there's some sexist stuff in here.
Well, the reason that the authors don't have those kind of problems is because the people that are making trouble can't read. So it's sort of a self-solving problem.
They can't, or the only thing they actually do read are magazines. Like the Cosmo. Let's see what shade I'm supposed to wear this summer. Oh, it looks like pinks and violets are in.
So I think the game thing is would be a self-solving problem too. Like the people that want to see that content can install it. Maybe they can make it like a hot coffee mod for Grand Theft Auto, where you have to you have to actually jump through some hoops to install it. And then it's like, yes, I'm experiencing Heinlein the way that it was meant to be experienced. Yes.
Well, here's the problem. Also, a lot of the people that read the books that are out there, if people who read Game of Thrones and that sort of thing, there's some messed up stuff in there, and I'm sure the SJWs would hate that. But let's back to games. The thing about games is a lot of the people causing the trouble are merely that they're just the social justice warriors. They don't actually play video games. They don't actually know that they're art. They don't actually know what's going on in the games. They're just yelling and screaming about videos that they saw on YouTube. And let's face it, they love to be offended. It's so fun to be offended that you can go on Twitter and post something and get a gazillion upvotes from all your other friends who sit in coffee shops all day and don't actually play video games. And that's okay if you guys sit in coffee shops all day. Enjoy your coffee. Comment on that. Just leave our video games alone unless you actually play them yourself. If you know what you're talking about, you can say something. If you don't, shut your mouth. All right, that's pretty much the end of that.
Man, Berta Lovejoy gets me every time.
She's hilarious.
It's like, I'm not going to like this. And it's like, this is actually really funny.
While we're on video games, one last thing. Stay tuned for WASD coming up this Monday. We are going to start a little trouble with PC Gamer. It needs to happen, guys. So PC Gamer, I'm not sorry at all for what's about to come your way. You have bothered the PC users, PC Master Race as they're sometimes called. I don't even like to use that word, that phrase all that much. But we'll be having some fun, probably at your expense. So everyone stay tuned for that. And it's all about the community really, and we're here to make sure that. You guys know what we're here for. Whatever. That's the end. I like ending on that sort of note. But yeah, there's trouble coming. We like starting trouble. At least I do. It's good for business, right? Maybe. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know either. It keeps everyone distracted enough so that we can go and do good deeds and that sort of thing without getting yelled at for doing good deeds. Because if you do a good deed, you'll get punished. So we just start enough trouble that everyone's focused on that, and then we can go over and do nice things, right? My chair keeps. I think we've had an earthquake because my chair keeps just moving this way. So when we were at CES, there must have been an earthquake. Was there an earthquake?
Yeah.
There was an earthquake. Berta Lovejoy came over. There was an earthquake. All right, that's the end of the episode. We'll see you guys in the next episode. What's happening? You want to say goodbye to everybody?
I'm coming for you, Tyler Wilde.
Bravo.
We'll see you next week. Stay tuned for WASD.